Can a god be jealous? Can a god insist that he, quote unquote, alone can be worshipped and punish if his rules are not followed? Does such an entity fit in with the dharmic conception of God? A young Sri Krishna and his brother Balarama were wandering about in Vraja. Sri Krishna sees the denizens of Vraja arranging a yajna for Lord Indra. The arrangements for this yajna was headed by Maharaja Nanda, who was Sri Krishna's foster father. Now, Krishna is a young boy. Feigning innocence, he asks his father Nanda to explain the reason for performing this yajna, this activity. He, in fact, presses his father, asking if it was scriptural or just a societal custom to do this yajna. His father replies, Indra is the god of rains. He is worshipped via offerings that were produced by the rains that he himself had delivered. By accepting the remnants of the yajna, people acquire the Trivarga, the three aims of life: Dharma, righteousness; Artha, wealth and economic development; and Kama, gratification of the senses. His father does not dismiss the question, but actually strives to give him a deep understanding of why these yajnas were performed. He does not give a shallow explanation. Now, Indra has always been eulogized for good harvest and fertility. The rationale for the Vedic yajnas were not just sense gratification. Only if life is sustained can the Trivargas be fulfilled, the three aims of human life. So if these rituals, these yajnas, are done out of greed, they lose their meaning. This is what Maharaja Nanda states. Sri Krishna, deliberately intending to arouse the anger of Lord Indra, states, Karmana jayate jantu, karmanaiva praliyate, sukham dukkham bhayam shemam, karmanaiva abhipadyate. It is by karma that a living entity takes birth and finally meets its end. Happiness, desire, fears are all just the effects of karma. And he continues, even if there is an Ishvara who gives material rewards, this Ishvara, this God, must actually bestow the reward based on the laws of karma, the actions of the actor. Now, to most in the Jnana Marga, this already resonates with the Dharmic teachings. All desires, tendencies, strengths, and insecurities arise due to karma. Sri Krishna again emphasizes the role of karma as one of the main dictating factors in the journey of the self towards liberation, towards the Godhead. He states that one must perform the actions without the self in mind. The rituals should not be a shortcut for a materialist to gain his earthly desires and perform actions that are not righteous. One cannot ignore the laws of karma. Karma is like the laws of physics that will guide one towards liberation or keep them yoked to the cycle of birth and death. Now, Sri Krishna proceeds further, deliberately wanting to antagonize Indra. He says, why should people worship Indra if everything depends on karma? And he says, the clouds rain impelled by energy, rajas. What does the great Indra have to do with this? And not stopping there, Sri Krishna then presents another idea. The center stay of Vraja was the Govardhana hill. The hill and the surrounding forests provided abundant pastures for the cows to graze. So, Sri Krishna says, we always dwell on these forests and the hills. These provide grazing grounds for our cows, and so let this hill that sustains our livelihood be venerated. So he proposes that they worship the Govardhana hill instead of Indra. Again, he does it intentionally to anger Indra because the Srimad Bhagavatam is the Leela of Krishna. And why does he do that? He does that to rid the false pride of Indra. The Srimad Bhagavatam states, Kalatmana Bhagavata Shakra Darpa Jihamsaya. Manifesting as the force of time, the Godhead desired to rid the false pride of Indra. And there is also a deep symbolism behind this, which we will look at later. And finally, the Gopas do what Krishna suggested. They perform the yajna to the Govardhana hill, and here things get really interesting. Sri Krishna himself assumes a huge form and declares that he, in fact, is Govardhana. He assumes a gigantic form, and he then accepts the offerings that were given to him. Now, this is the last straw for the great Deva Indra. He is furious. He wanted to punish the humans who, listening to Sri Krishna, had offended him. He sends forth great clouds of destruction called Samvartakam. So he orders the clouds to dispel the pride of people and bring the Gopas and their cows to destruction. Torrential rains started to pour down, accompanied by howling winds. A fierce hailstorm raged as the skies blazed with the sights of lightning and sounds of thunder. The earth began to be submerged by the flood. All beings, humans and animals, approached Sri Krishna for help. They asked him to save themselves and the community of cows, Gokulam, from the wrath of Indra. Now, Sri Krishna himself is an aspect of the Supreme Absolute, so he had to protect the humans. They were caught in a crossfire that he had created. So he very simply picked up the Govardhana hill as though it was just a small mushroom and held it high over his head. He then calmly tells the citizens of Raja not to be afraid and asks all of them to come below the hill to take refuge from the rains. For 7 days, Krishna stood holding the hill aloft. Indra, on seeing this extraordinary sight, asked the wind and the rains to cease. Indra's ego disappeared. The sun came out and the citizens headed out from the mountain. Sri Krishna then set the Govardhana hill in its original place to the adulation of all the inhabitants of Raja. Now, what is the symbolism behind this narrative? The definition of God in Sanatana Dharma is Anadi Anantam Suddham Shivam Shantam Nirgunam, which means without beginning and end, pure, auspicious, and unqualified, without any attributes or qualities. All that exists is a dance of delight, the Leela of this Supreme Absolute as it ebbs and flows across grand cycles of manifestation and dissolution. Lord Indra is the king of the Devas. He is a cosmic force of the infinite, endowed with a higher level of consciousness, among other qualities. Outwardly, he is celebrated for his powers, and in the Vedas is eulogized as a harbinger of fertility. In Puranic theology, Indra is the king of the Devas and the ruler of the Swargaloka. In the Puranas, we see Indra as having a bit of ego and insecurity. But there is a deep symbolism behind this as well. Indra symbolizes the divine mind, and this is called out in the Rigvedic verse, Yo jata eva pratamo manaswan. He is the first to have a mind even as he was born. So, when this infinite manifests itself, Indra, in this grand dance, symbolizes the divine mind and the senses that enables the self, the Atman, to function in the material world. The mind is responsible for getting the information via the senses. Indriyam actually means senses and the vigor associated with the senses. For instance, organs of action are called karmendriyam. One has to sustain in the material world before one can think of things such as liberation. So Indra symbolizes the mind and the force by which one can navigate the material. He is the king of Swargaloka, one of the higher realms of existence, which is heavenly from the material perspective. In fact, he is called the king of the three worlds, Bhuloka, Bhuvarloka, and Swargaloka. Here, Indra is surrounded by the material modes of heaven, which draws the senses outwards. So, of course, even though he is a great force, a great god, he too is afflicted at times by Ahamkara, the ego, the I-ness. But the greatness of Indra is that in all the narratives, he wins over his senses. In fact, the ancient Tamil text Tirukkural describes this quality of Indra in the chapter on greatness of ascetics. Aindavittan Aatral, Agal Visumbular Koman, Indirane Salunkari. Indra, the king of the residents of the wide heaven, is himself a sufficient proof of the strength of him who has subdued his five senses. Now, this is what is being talked about in the Puranic narratives. But that's not all. In order to understand this narration of Govardhana better, we need to look at the symbolism behind the words used. The word go or gau in Sanskrit translates to cow. But the word go also translates to a ray of light and knowledge. Knowledge which is spiritual knowledge. Govardhana means bestower of knowledge. Lord Krishna is also called the protector of cows, but any narrative like the Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita is all about the knowledge that one needs to possess to move towards liberation. So Govardhana here is the bestower of knowledge. Also, the name of the place where this incident takes place is Vraja. Vraja means to go, to roam. A pasture is where cows roam. The word Vrajaka is also used to refer to a wandering monk making his way towards knowledge or spreading knowledge. So again, this narration emphasizes destroying ego and moving towards knowledge. The knowledge of unity of being that leads one towards liberation. This same symbolism is present in the Rig Veda as well, and actually in reference to the great Indra himself. In a chant dedicated to Indra, the Rig Veda states, Indro dirghaya chakshasa asuryam rohayat divi vigobir adrim airayat. The first verse says, Indra, to make everything visible, placed the sun high in the sky. Sayana, the grammarian from the Vijayanagara Empire, in the year 1300s, gives context to this verse. He says that when Vritra, the demon, represented often as a serpent or a dragon, enveloped the world in darkness, Indra dispelled the darkness by the rays of light. The second line is often left untranslated. Vigobir adrim airayat. It actually translates to hitting the hills with cows. This does not make any sense. The actual translation is done by taking the contextual meanings of the words go and adrim. Adri also means ignorance and go means the essence of knowledge. So the translation actually is Indra destroying ignorance with the essence of knowledge. The Vedic Indra acquired knowledge, dispelling ignorance, but when the senses led him astray towards ego and ignorance, he had to learn how to reconquer his senses. Indra's story is the weakness of the Jivatma, the self that is cloaked by Ahamkara, the ego. When the self is bound by the senses to ignorance, avidya, Indra, conquering his senses, attains the knowledge of reality. Indra, the great god that he is, successfully conquers his senses. He needs to, because he is the king of Swarga, the only conventional heaven in the 7 higher realms of existence. And of course, the Dharmic definition of God still stands. Can a god be jealous? Can a god insist that he alone is to be worshipped? God is infinite and not a jealous external entity. A Dharmic god does not demand worship by inciting fear or greed. And the real meaning of devotion, bhakti, is to dissolve the ego and move towards being one with the infinite. This is the story of Indra. As always, the known is a drop and the unknown an ocean. Peace.